It's actually scandalous. I mean, there's no other way to put it. As you correctly point out, you could say that the additional borrowing costs wipe out about 2 percentage points on African GDP across the board. Take a country like Côte d'Ivoire. It is similarly rated to Serbia, and yet its issuance, its debt, is priced at above 50 basis points more than Serbia's. You take South Africa. On the data, South Africa should be rated by the ratings agencies as a triple B. It's currently rated at double B minus. Generally, African sovereigns are rated about 4 rungs lower than they ought to be, just based on the data. Based on the data suggested by the ratings versus the actual default data, there's a mismatch, and it's inexplicable. The data just does not support the ratings, and therefore the costs. And in the case of South Africa, that additional cost is about 50 to 70 billion rand per annum. It's scandalous. And ought to change.
Bloomberg, one of the biggest financial media outlets in the world, just exposed racist banking prejudice that has been quietly holding Africa back for decades. In this video, we're going to break down a powerful conversation between some of Africa's leading bankers as they reveal how the Western banking system consistently mistreats African nations through biased ratings, inflated borrowing costs, and a perception problem that has nothing to do with economic reality. I believe it's up to us, Africans and African diaspora, to relentlessly expose the injustice that Western institutions continue to participate in, whether they are governments, corporations, or financial players. These racist and predatory practices hold the continent back, and they must be called out so they can no longer operate in the shadows. If you believe in this fight, then this video is for you. If you don't know me, my name is TJ. I'm Nigerian and British mixed. And on this channel, we talk about African geopolitics. So this conversation took place at Bloomberg's Africa Business Summit in Johannesburg just a few days ago, and it featured some of the most influential figures in African finance. On stage were Jeremy Awori of Ecobank, Kenny Fihla of Absa, Roosevelt Ogbonna of Access Bank, and Tshabalala of Standard Bank. These are the men responsible for guiding billions of dollars in capital across the continent. The conversation was moderated by Bloomberg's Jacqueline Simmons, and for once, Bloomberg did not hide the painful truth. They broadcast it, exposing this issue to the world. What these men revealed was simple and devastating. Africa is being financially punished for no reason that data can justify. The African Finance Corporation estimates that African countries pay an additional $75 billion every single year because of unfair borrowing costs. That is $75 billion gone into thin air, taken out of schools, hospitals, roads, power plants, and infrastructure that could transform lives. And they use the word prejudice. One of the clearest examples mentioned was Côte d'Ivoire. It has a similar economic rating to that of Serbia, yet Serbia's debt is priced 50 basis points cheaper. 50 basis points may sound small, but on a national debt level, it's actually massive. South Africa is another case where, according to the panel, the data shows it should be rated a triple B instead of rated a double B minus, which leads to an additional 50 to 70 billion rand in unnecessary borrowing costs every single year. So what I'm sharing here are not opinions. These are hard numbers coming from CEOs that manage Africa's biggest banks. And here is where I step in with language that they cannot use. These men are professionals. They operate within the global financial system, and they still have to work with the rating agencies and the Western institutions controlling global capital. They cannot sit on a stage like this and call it racism, but I can. Because if African economies have lower default rates, higher recovery rates, and stronger repayment histories than many Western or Eastern European countries, yet they are still rated lower and forced to borrow at higher costs, what exactly are we supposed to call that? If you strip away the jargon, remove the polite language, and look straight at the numbers, the story tells you everything. There is an engineered fear built into African ratings. A fear not based on fact, but one based on perception. And that perception has been historically shaped by racism, colonial thinking, and outdated narratives. This impacts everything: investment, development, infrastructure, the speed at which Africa can actually industrialize, which I've made a video on recently explaining why that is so very important, including even how African banks are rated, because their sovereign rating places a ceiling over them. It is a chain reaction of inequality. Then came one of the most powerful moments in the conversation. Many of you have dropped comments asking how you can support this channel, even offering to donate or help financially. Until recently, I had no way to make this possible. But now through my Substack, it's never been easier for you to lend me some support. There's a free tier where you'll get 1 email per week, and for just $5 a month, about the price of a nice coffee, you'll receive a daily written update from all of my content, everything I produce. I'll be engaging with those of you who join, asking your thoughts on how to serve you and the continent better. Sometimes my videos do get demonetized, and there's also a small chance, as we saw with the Platform Africa stream, that a channel like this could be deplatformed. Even if the worst happens, we can regroup, rebuild, and keep pushing forward. We don't want any third party controlling this message, so with email backing us up, we can communicate directly. Thank you in advance for signing up. I look forward to connecting with you, not just on YouTube, but via email as well. Roosevelt Ogbonna spoke about cobalt from Congo.
Just outside on one of the tables there, you had something Bloomberg had done that says 76% of cobalt is gotten out of DRC in Congo. So I went quickly to see what raw cobalt is about $880. Refined and fully processed is about, on the London Metal Exchange this morning, is over 42,000. So you're talking $880 to $42,000 raw to refined. And DRC Congo has no play in that conversation.
Think about that. 800 to 40,000. That is a 50 times increase in value. And that type of number exposes why that conflict for control in Congo and extractive measures that keep the Congolese from profiting from their raw materials is so very profitable. You see, in Congo, there is no processing, no refining, no industrial buildup, and no high-skilled jobs. Just extraction and export only. Having tribal factions fight in Eastern DRC over the ability to sell raw materials to Western corporations and countries is just way too profitable to actually tidy up the mess, which is why that conflict has persisted for over 3 decades. You can see how deep this issue goes, and where incentives to provide Africa with increased barriers now makes much more sense. And that is just one mineral in one country. Africa has 30% of the world's minerals, 60% of the world's arable land, and some of the richest energy potential anywhere on Earth. If cobalt alone has that kind of value gap, imagine what Africa loses every year across copper, gold, lithium, manganese, platinum, uranium, and every other resource that comes out of the continent. This is not an accident. This is the same colonial economic structure that was built to extract raw minerals cheaply and to sell them back to Africa at 50 times the price. These bankers were polite about it, but the truth is clear. Africa is punished for where it is located, who controls global narratives, and who benefits in keeping the continent in a raw material exporting trap. But here's the good news. The system is cracking. For the first time, mainstream institutions like Bloomberg are exposing this type of injustice. When Western outlets admit that the rating system are biased, when CEOs of Africa's largest banks openly discuss that prejudice premium, it creates pressure. It creates accountability, and it starts to shift global perception. Let's not also forget about other players coming into the space. China and the broader global south are rising. China is starting to provide an alternative for Western finance. Whether you like or dislike China's approach, one thing is certain: Western institutions now have competition. They can no longer take their dominance for granted. This is good for Africa. A multipolar world means that Africa can negotiate better terms, pitching two sides against each other. It means Africa can now choose. It means Africa can start to gain some leverage. As the global south grows closer through trade, investment, and that shared experience of exploitation, Africa will not walk this journey alone. The global south knows what this prejudice looks like. It has lived through it, just like Africa. So when African countries and their allies expose the racist and neo-colonial foundations of global finance, it forces change. When Africa builds internal banking system, integrate capital markets, and reduces dependency on external lenders, it forces change even faster. Because here is the truth Western institutions do not want to admit. Finance needs Africa. Africa is the last major frontier of global economic growth. The population is booming, the middle class is rising, and the energy sector, agriculture, digital ecosystems, and green minerals will define the next century. Meanwhile, the West, population-wise and in many other metrics, is shrinking. If Africa starts capturing value higher up the supply chain, if refining, processing, manufacturing, and innovation happen on the continent, then global finance will flood into Africa, not because it wants to help, but because it wants to profit. That is how capitalism works. So it will create a positive flywheel where Africa will be able to start industrializing and become manufacturing powerhouses. This is why exposing this type of injustice matters right now. When you expose a broken system, you create the opportunity to replace it. When you break old neo-colonial financial structures, you create blue ocean opportunities for growth and development that no one can ignore. The West is weakening and the world is shifting into a multipolar structure. This means the global South will rise together. It means Africa's time is coming, and whether Western institutions like it or not, inter-Africa trade, continental banking integration, and global South cooperation will force this change into existence. It's not a question of if, it's only a question of when. And our job right here is to make sure Africa is ready and spread the word. If you want to be part of spreading the word, would it be too much if I asked you to write something in the comments section to help push the algorithm? I suggest the following words. Let's break colonial finance. Not only does it push the algorithm, but it lets me know that you support the channel, you watch the video to the end, you like what I'm doing, and you want me to continue. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.